When I went to live in Africa, I found that the local people, the Africans, were also interested in succulents, but not as a hobby as we are. For them, succulents are part of the environment from which they have to make a living. And so I want to look at some of the ways in which they deal with these. I should add that almost all the pictures I'm showing you this week were taken by me, but I must confess I didn't take this one. When I first went to Africa in 1966, I was offered a lectureship in a university in Ghana, which is there. And I thought, Ghana, that's Africa. Africa's full of succulents. So imagine my surprise on arriving and finding I was living in the middle of a tropical rainforest. And the trees are 200 feet high. Very much disturbed because banana at the front there comes from India, but nevertheless it was still rainforest. But when I travelled around, I found there are succulents outside in the savanna regions. Certainly the first use, I'm going to be dealing now with the ways in which they're used, was as decorative plants. This is a flower bed outside the main administration block in the place where I was working. Plants from various places, some these euphorbias, heterospina, are from East Africa. Then you've got various American things. You've got Jatropha podagrica, a puntia here, which looks as though it gets kicked every time someone walks past. Some big Facroyas or whatever they are, and so on. So quite a few have been brought in, Madagascar, Americas, South Africa, as plants for cultivation, just for decoration purposes. Also growing there was this aloe Ki, which is one that I looked at in some detail and decided that it was a hybrid between two others, Buchnerite and Schweinfurtii. And the code of nomenclature says that a hybrid brought into cultivation can be given a cultivar name. I didn't put it there, but I later described it as a cultivar. In fact, I named it after my daughter at the time. Then we have, no, that's not actually Ki, that's just another one, because one advantage of having the aloes in the garden is that they bring in the birds which come in for pollination. And you get an amazing array of sunbirds in particular. And they're the equivalent of the hummingbirds in America pollinating agaves and other things. Later I moved over to the east, to Kenya, which is more or less there. So I used to live under a cloud there, but here Kenya is a much drier location. You've got more grassland, woodland like this, with big euphorbias of that sort. So there are far more succulents in Kenya than there are in the west, in West Africa. Again, things used as decoration. This is a street in Nairobi with these barberry, of course a South African species, but Aloe Vera forming nice street trees. Much later, this one was cut down to make room for a parking meter, but the others are still there. Euphorbia Lateral Flora. This is rather a wild-looking bush. This is back in West Africa. I'm jumping around a bit just to talk about Africa generally, but it's mostly these two areas. This one forms nice hedges. I had a hedge around my garden of this. It's called Lateral Flora, which means flowers on the side, but actually it's got terminal flowers. And the reason is, again, I was talking about the way in which plants were named the other day, and in the type specimen, what happened was that it branched just below the inflorescence, and when it was put on the herbarium sheet, it was straight, and it looked as though the flowers are coming from the side. But again, you can't change the name because it doesn't really fit. Aloe kedongensis in Kenya, comes from the Kedong Valley. Ensis again means from, and this is used by farmers. It's almost extinct in the wild. It's definitely extinct at the type locality. I've been there, but it is in one or two other places, but it's dying out. But fortunately, salvation for this species is that it's, oops, sorry, I did that too soon, pressing the wrong button again. It is used as a hedge, as you see, quite extensively. It's a bit scruffy at the bottom, but at least it flowers, and at the top it looks like a nice plant. So that's Aloe kedongensis. Here, I got here very early. The chap had only recently planted this. It's actually a Kleinia odora, used as it's going at the moment just a boundary marker, but that's also going to grow into a hedge in due course, because Kleinia odora also gets quite big, over a metre in height. So uses as hedges. are there. That's just some of the flower heads, not a very exciting flower from our point of view. Another one, this was up on the Jos Plateau in Nigeria. Jos Plateau is a very high area. Most of West Africa is very low altitude, but this is about 4,000 feet. And quite a lot of nice plants up there. But here I'm interested in seeing that there is this hedge. And this hedge is actually, it's a euphorbia, as you see. Euphorbia camerunica. First described from Cameroon, by a German who used a K for the name, and it goes also into northern Nigeria. So that's just planted in rows like that, and it just grows as a hedge. There's the plant as it grows in the wild. That's as it should be, looking quite different from a hedge plant. Okay, Busia, this is a euphorbia in Kenya again. As I said, I'm jumping around. Not put as the hedge itself, but in place of barbed wire along the top. You wouldn't really want to go clambering over that. Not only is it thorny, but as you know, euphorbias have a white latex that is very caustic. You get it in your eye or somewhere else sensitive, and it's very unpleasant. There you are, that's what it looks like there. So it's not very nice chopping down all these euphorbias, but that's how they are used there. Agave, of course, is not African. It comes from Mexico. Over 100 years ago, it was imported as a crop. And now there are vast plantations of it. Even though after Ryan and after various nylon and things like that were invented, the sisal is still used. I often tell people that this is a post office plantation growing more of these, but that's not really correct. And so there are these vast plantations, and they don't really like trespassers. They're very realistic. You'll be prosecuted if you're caught. If you're not caught, you're okay. This is one of, I think, only 3 succulents that have a whole book devoted to them. There's a whole book devoted to this one species. It even went through 3 volumes, 3 editions. The others are Aloe Vera and the peyote, Lophifora Williams. I think they have books to themselves. As far as I know, they're the only 3. But it's quite an important crop. It's a very important crop in East Africa, and it's still in use because there are many things made from it. Most of these baskets are made from that, and they make mats and all kinds of things. So it's still a very important economic plant there. Then Sansevieria I put in because Sansevierias are plants, again, with fibres. If you break the end of the leaf, you've got lots of fibres. And there are lots of common names like African sisal, bowstring, hemp. They're still used as fibres by many people. It's not the only fibrous plant. There are also a few aloes. This is, as you see, aloe named for it, Aloe fibrosa, one that John Lebranos and I named many years ago. This is Peter Bally again, caught in the act. He's got his secateurs ready there. And we had gone out to look at this. This is actually a tight locality in Kenya, and this is what it's like. If you pull off a leaf at the base, you see all these fibres. And these fibres are in place of the cells that produce the yellow exudate that comes when you break a leaf. So these don't produce that yellow exudate at all. And this one would not be very useful for medicinal purposes for that reason, because that's the medicinal value. Adansonia, I said I'm going to overlap a bit here with Andre's talk. The baobab tree, questionable on whether it's succulent or not, but we still always include it. There's a whole plantation of this. It's very common only in lowland areas in Kenya. I live at 5,500 feet, it's nowhere near there. But if you go down to the coast, there are millions of them. And here's a really nice one. This actually, that picture was in Kenya and this one is in Ghana. It's a very widespread species, first described from Senegal, in fact. Then, as you know, it goes right down into Zimbabwe. And as was mentioned by Andrew, many of them have big hollow trunks which are used for all sorts of things, for prisons and bus stops and I don't know what. And I think he even said there's one used for a toilet, and there it is. This was in Zimbabwe. This is actually a scan of an old picture, but there is the throne inside there, the door open. They have these huge flowers. There are very many uses, and I won't go into all of them, The fruits have this edible pulp around, which makes a nice drink. The fruits are hard, they can be cut and used as a cup, and so on. The Sansevieria, as I mentioned, here is a slipper made out of Sansevieria leaf by children, really. Obviously, it's not a very long-lasting one, but the children play and they make their own little slippers out of these flat-leaf Sansevierias. And then the cylindrical ones, this one is Sansevieria fisheri, and that is used for making brushes like this. This one had been used by this local lady there, and she showed us how she made it. You just bash it with a stone, and then you use it for scrubbing your pots. She used it in the kitchen. It's very nice. Euphorbias, there are quite a few tree euphorbias. Quincunx costata, growing on the edge of this lake, and another one, Rebekii. Now these have wood. Many years ago, Dr. Dyer in South Africa wrote an article about the timber and more or less pointed out that the timber's not much use because it's not very strong and it's got this horrible latex in it and so on. But here in East Africa, actually it was in Somalia, they found some use for these two, and especially this one, Rebekii. It's a very distinctive plant, a very lovely tree. But what was happening was that they were cutting it all down, and then they were using this wood to make crates for exporting bananas. Again, scan of a very old black and white picture, I'm afraid. This was actually an article written by Peter Bally on this, so I scanned those two old pictures. So that's why Rebekii got rather depleted here and there. Fortunately, it's still around, there's still plenty there, but for very many of those trees, they went into crates for exporting bananas. Very lightweight crates, but apparently quite strong. Okay, another use, this is a Sansevieria again, as you see, robusta, and Sansevierias, most of them they have rhizomes underground, and they spread. Some of them have runners above ground, but many of them, I think the majority, have rhizomes underground, and this helps to bind the soil. And this one was planted this one was planted all along the road here to prevent water coming down and eroding the road itself. Obviously, there's been a little bit here. So that's planted to prevent erosion control. And this aloe also, if you look here, you can see this is a greatly eroded area, and so they've planted this aloe along here in rows. So this is one of the rows. There's another one just up there in order to try and stop this erosion. This one, Chrysostachys. Chrysostachys means literally yellow spike because it has yellow spikes of yellow flowers. It's a gate one John Lavranis and I described many years ago. Oh, well, there it is in the type locality. It actually grows on this rocky hill, and so it's just in soil pockets, and it's scattered all over on these rocks. That's its natural habitat. But the local people have used it for erosion control. Adenium obesum, one of the desert rose. This is an interesting species because I've seen it, it was first described from Yemen, and I've seen it in Yemen with big tuberous bases, or the bases of the stem, so it really is obese. But it seems to get a bit thinner in Kenya, and as you go further west, it goes as far as Nigeria, where it's even more slender. In fact, there it was given a different name, Adenium honghel, but now I think it's all regarded as one species. But this is poisonous, and many poisonous plants are used by Africans for arrow poison, for hunting or killing people or whatever they want to do with it, and also for fishing, because they used to put this poison into the water, which stupefies the fish, and they float up to the surface and you fish them out and eat them. Well, the bows and arrows, we still see bows and arrows occasionally, but guns have come in now. But many of these plants are poisonous, and not quite often they use a mixture. So this is one that they would have used in a mixture of poisons from different species. This is the flower of obesum. You're familiar with this. I know that in this country there have been lots of hybrids as well produced. There are also several poisonous aloe species. 3 in Kenya. There are half a dozen or 8 or so altogether in the world. And these 3 in Kenya. Aloe raspoliana is a fairly low-growing plant, like that. This is it growing in the wild in the north. Once when I was up in the northeast corner of Kenya, this was up near Mandera, where Kenya, Ethiopia and Somalia all meet. And an old man pointed to one of those and said, "That's what we use for killing hyenas." And apparently at night time, late night, they take a piece of meat, they break an aloe leaf, smear the juice on and leave it lying there, and the next morning, dead hyenas lying around. And later, this similar thing was reported by John Lawrence from Somalia. So they are very poisonous. And then Aloe balii is a different habit of growth. With this picture, I took a group of people there last March, and we saw exactly the same spot with this hill and so on behind it, and even the telegraph wire, but not an aloe to be seen. It's all been cut down. However, the story is then that this is also poisonous. It's called the rat aloe, which doesn't sound like a very great compliment to Peter Bally, after whom it was named, but anyway, it's called that because if you break the leaf, you get the smell of rats or mice. That's what it smells like. And that smell is the poison. It's a poison called gamma-conicine, and I'm not sure, I think I might have put, there's the name of it. It's actually a hemlock poison, because hemlock is a different family, but chemically they are related. It's a very strong poison. And because a couple of thousand years ago, that was used as a means of execution. The philosopher Socrates died in that way. They give you a cup of this to drink, and you drink it, that's the end of you. So this is a very nasty poison. The other one that looks similar to balii, has some differences, is Aloe elata. So those are our three poisonous ones in this country and in Kenya. And you needn't bother to read the whole thing, but this was the last record I saw in 2008 from the Standard, a local newspaper. Man dies after taking aloe vera. See, the Kenyans call all aloes aloe vera. And they just refer to all of them. So if they pick the wrong one, what it says here, the hospital authorities said that the deceased could have taken the wrong species of the aloe tree. Well, this is from Voi, a town I know well, and around there's quite a lot of Aloe balii. As I said, it's disappearing now. It used to grow in the bush alongside the road, between the farm and the road, but now the farmers are farming right down to the edge of the road. That's why it's disappearing. So there are many other records, or several other records, of people dying as well. So it is quite dangerous. It is a nasty poison. So I'm always trying to convince people that they shouldn't just take any old aloe and use it for medicine. They take it internally, as well as putting it on skin for burns and things. So I think it's the internal use which has killed people. Aloe vera, of course, is again not Kenyan. It is, well, it's one of those things where we say nobody really knows where it came from, but it's almost certainly from the Arabian Peninsula. This is the first illustration of it in the year 512 in the Dioscorides Herbal, the illustrated herbal. And officinalis is the nearest relative. Unfortunately, it wasn't flowering when I was there. This is in the Tahama Desert in Yemen, along the coast of the Red Sea. And that seems to be the nearest relative. And in fact, some botanists some years ago actually made them two varieties of one thing. But because vera is really a very old cultivar, very ancient cultivar, which has been used around the tropics and subtropics for a very long time. I actually took this picture of one growing wild in Brazil. I was looking for cacti, but this was what we came across somewhere in the wilds of Brazil, complete with a 20th century artifact left there, unfortunately. Some people, I don't know why people do that sort of thing. Okay, and it has many uses. It's very much publicised all over the place, which is why everybody calls all aloes aloephora. Lots of soaps. These are a few odd ones that I've collected over the years. And then we've got all kinds of things here. We have toothpaste, shampoo, I don't know what that juice, I think you drink that one. All kinds of things. And also to internal, if you want to cleanse your guts, you see, you take these tablets. I didn't try them, I brought the box, I bought it just for the box, but I threw the tablets away. It's also used medicinally, apparently they say, in managing AIDS. And I'm very interested in that because since I retired I've been suffering from AIDS, the acquired income deficiency syndrome. And then there's even washing powder. I don't know what the aloe vera does when you're washing your clothing with that, but more amazing still, even toilet paper. with aloe vera and vitamin E. It's just an amazing new way to supplement your pension, your diet. Still thinking of my pension and my AIDS. Anyway. So very many uses, some of which are rather questionable maybe. Aloe secundiflora, called secund because the flowers are second like that. This is one that a lot of people are now using for farming. We're encouraging farming in Kenya because there were a lot of sort of spivs going around all the villages collecting the latex from people and paying them something like 2 shillings for a litre, and it took them 2 days to collect that. So we've now set up a system where they're going to get a fair pay for it, but they have to show that they have got plantations, not just doing it in the wild, because it does happen in the wild. This is a place where I pulled off one night to camp when I was in the north, and when I woke up in the morning, this is the early morning light, I saw this. That's the remains of an aloe, and over here there's a hole. And what they do is to pile all these over a bowl in the depression in the ground there, and then they just let it drip into there and collect it later. And of course this had happened before, so that's what we have left there. And that's what's left of the plant. But of course these people are not completely stupid. They know that if they leave it alive, then in another year or two there'll be more leaves there and they can come back and do it again. So they don't actually destroy the plant, but it probably doesn't do the plant much good. I don't know what effect it has on flowering, probably it will stop it. So that is happening there. This is actually a plant of Aloe secundiflora from the type locality growing in my garden. And when I'm out, when people see that my car is not there, they come in and take some leaves. And I wish they would ask. Occasionally people do come and ask, and I don't mind. I say, yes, fine, I'll cut a leaf off for you, But I'm afraid they come in when I'm not there, and the plant doesn't do too well out of that. Okay, Bulbini frutescens. Now, we have only one species of Bulbini in Kenya, which is a very low-growing one, Bulbini abyssinica. But we have this very common, this is a South African one, frutescens, in cultivation. It's all over the place. And a lot of people use that instead of the aloe. Apparently it's very effective at dealing with burns and spots on your skin and so on. And yet it hasn't really been exploited all that much. But a lot of people know that in Kenya this is very useful for that purpose. It's a nice plant. It has these flowers with hairy stamens. Very interesting plant. Of course, as I say, we have only the one up there which looks a bit like this but doesn't form a stem. But in South Africa there are lots of really nice species with all sorts of little rounded succulent leaves and so on. All right, that's just to show the flower. I'd forgotten I'd put that in, sorry. Okay, Hudia species. This is interesting. Now I've gone a bit away from West or East Africa now. This is in the south. I think it's in Namibia where I photographed this one. There are several species, and one of them, I think it was called Hudia goldeneye. You probably heard that the Kalahari Bushmen used to chew the stems of this when they went on hunting expeditions, and it somehow suppressed their hunger. And a chemical company somewhere got wind of this and decided this was great. There's so much obesity in the world these days that maybe we can make a really good medicine out of this. And well, these people were pretty canny. They got a lawyer and they said, right, if you're going to make use of our traditional knowledge here, we want something. So actually a big agreement was signed, but they were going to get a percentage of the profit which they could use for community development, building a health centre or school or something. So that's what happened for a few years. And then apparently, more recently, I haven't seen this paper, but there was a paper published showing it's not really very effective after all. It's not all that good. So I'm afraid these poor people won't get so much money out of it after all. But for a while, some of you may have seen, we were bombarded in the spam on our internet with lots of adverts for this, but they seem to have died away now. Because they were also cultivating, old Gordon I think it was that they were cultivating. So that's a use that didn't really come to very much. Quite a few plants have medicinal value. This is Pyrinacanthum albifolia growing in Kenya, and what you'll see if you look closely is people have been chopping away at this, cutting bits out, and that apparently also is medicinal use. I'm not exactly sure what they used it for. I came across this, it had happened, but I didn't see the people who were doing it. Aloe confusa. This is a type locality. It's actually the same spot that I photographed earlier, because that is the euphorbia up there, Quinqa costata, Euphorbia Quinqa costata. It's type locality, and it's a type locality for this aloe. This is an old volcanic crater that's filled up with water, right on the border between Kenya and Tanzania. And the interesting thing about Aloe confusa here, why I'm bringing it in here, is that when you break the leaf or cut the leaf, the yellow exudate comes out, and within a very short time it turns purple. There we are, it's on my hand. So the local people use this for dyeing cloth. I don't know if it's a really good fast dye, but anyway, it's still there. They still use it for dyeing cloth. It's not the only species that does that, and in fact one of the new ones I have that I haven't yet described does the same, only a bit slower, but this goes within seconds. I assumed it was a sort of oxidation process, but one chemist I asked about this said he didn't really know what was going on there, how it happened. But there we are. So that is another use, again, for an aloe in this case. Okay, there's still a lot of very ancient tradition in these little villages all over Africa. This is up in the north of Togo, actually, country that lies just to the east of Ghana, and I was up there. And succulents, of course, are weird plants. They are weird shapes and so on, so they must be magical. So here is an altar in one of these little villages, and there is the euphorbia. It's Sudanica, named as Sudanica, not from what we know as Sudan now, but the whole of West Africa, when it was a French colonial territory, was known as the French Sudan, the Sudan Française. So that's actually referring to that, because this comes from what is now Burkina Faso, Upper Volta, and also the north of Ghana, which is where I took this picture in a village in Ghana. That wasn't the previous village. So what you see then is that this is growing alongside the author, where they slaughter chickens and do whatever else they do, and you see lots of it have been cut off, and that's before I took my cutting. So, so they use it in some way, but they didn't really want to tell me much about it. I think they're a bit suspicious of our interest in their old customs sometimes. So that is one that was used there. And this is the plant. Well, that's a cutting I did take, and later it produced leaves and grew in my collection. It's quite a nice species, actually. Very nice species. Another one is Possum. Very interesting plants. They're rather unusual. They've got this sort of silvery bark on them, fairly slow growing, and they've got only one spine instead of a pair. Most of these succulent euphorbias have paired spines, but here it's one. And these also are regarded as rather magical. There's just to show you the size of a goat or something over there. And once I came across a place where it was actually used as a fetish to prevent people going in and stealing crops. So they chop the top off, and then there's a bone. There's actually a feather behind there as well. I think I have a closer view. There we are. And there's a feather there as well, but it's fallen down. I keep propping it up, but just as I click the shutter, it fell down again. So I'm afraid you have to imagine that. But you see, if the local person sees that, they're scared stiff and they go away. They don't go anywhere near those crops. So here you are, as a fetish used to keep people away to protect crops, these magic plants, magical plants. Desmondi is another euphorbia. This is up on that Jos Plateau, where I showed you those hedges in north of Nigeria, on the Jos Plateau. And quite an interesting plant. And one day I was looking at something on old traditional musical instruments. I had a friend who was very interested in this, and I was looking for him for ways in which plants are used in that way. Here it is in flower. It's a very interesting inflorescence because it has this cyatheum, the flowering head, on the end of a stalk like that. It's very unusual, this whole thing, and those leaves are also succulent. But to get, oh, there you are, sorry, I've forgotten what I put in here. So this is it, and you see the red ants on here, attracted by these glands are producing a little nectar. However, to get back to the story, what I found is that stems of these stems with notches along there, are used to make a musical instrument. And it's dried, and because it's notched, if you rub a stick along it, then you get a sound. And this, in the thing I read, was called an idiophone, a scraper idiophone. You scrape the thing along. And I looked up the word idiophone in a dictionary, I couldn't find it, so I don't know what an idiophone really is. Maybe it means it's so simple to play that any idiot can play it, I don't know. But anyway, my friend was very pleased when I gave him this example. Talinum triangulare is in the Purslane, Portulaceae family, same family as Anacampthrus and Portulaca and so on. And it's got slightly fleshy leaves, which are edible. And there's one tribe in Ghana that uses it as a vegetable very frequently. They call it Fanti. Fanti is the name of the tribe, Fanti spinach. And I was told that Fanti, it actually means spinach eaters, the name of the group. They've been doing this for centuries. So that's, for most of us, it's a local weed. I didn't bother to put it in my garden, even though it's slightly succulent. This was just actually going along a path, walking along a path, and I saw a lot of it in flower. Just a small pocket knife to show you the size of it. There are several other edible ones. Albia dumeri, one of the stapeliads. This was in Kenya when I was out once, and a Maasai woman came along and saw what we were doing and saw that we were looking at these. Said, "Oh, they're nice, aren't they?" And she picked one up and chewed it and ate it. So these are also edible. And this one is, well, you can take your pick out of all those genera, depending on who you want to follow, but that's dumeri. And in Asclepios, some of you may have the Asclepios journal, in March 2011, they actually had a recipe for making some food out of this. Potato and caralluma curry. This was actually put in by someone from India, because there are these carallumas in India as well. And there are the ingredients, tells you how to do it. This is in 2011. So look for that journal if you're interested. There are the ingredients, that's how to cook it. So, but of course I'm sure you've got better things to do with your things than eat them. But there are other edible plants, are those with tubers. Quite a few of these plants have tubers. Brachystelma togoense from Togo, although I actually collected it in Nigeria, this one, it's a bit widespread. And that has tubers that are edible. Fortunately, the tuber is completely underground, so they don't disappear quite so quickly, you can't see them, because some of the local people are pretty good, actually, at identifying these young shoots. They know where they come from. So that's edible. And there are the flowers of it. It's quite a nice plant to grow in the collection. Another one is Raffianacme bingeri. It was called Raffianacme darreni when I found it, but later the name was changed by someone. So that's got a tuber, and there are the flowers. Oh, that one's upside down. Oh, never mind. That's the flower of Raffianacme bingeri. It's about a centimetre across at the most. So there you have all kinds of uses of plants. And I think we find that other people are interested as well, but not for the same reason as us. I rushed it and I've ended early, so there you are. time for questions, if any. Okay.
Any questions for Len?
What do they use the Aloe Flora sap for?
Sorry, the sap, various things. It's the one to the outside one, the yellow that comes out, is used for a laxative mainly, that's swallowed. But the inner part, which isn't yellow, but it's very, very fleshy and has a lot of medicinal value in it, is used for skin. If you have a burn or a cut or something, it treats it very effectively, very quickly. And so they actually make skin creams and all sorts of things from it commercially. Yeah. Yes?
Have you heard of any of them using Sansevieria?
I'm sorry, I'm suffering senile decay. I can't hear you very clearly. Have I heard of what?
The rhizomes of Sansevieria.
Yeah.
Being eaten?
Not being eaten, no. I haven't heard anything about that. It may or may not be possible. I could have added perhaps that the roots of aloes are used for brewing beer. There are actually many other uses. I sort of restricted what I put here. But for Sansevierias, no. I've never heard of any use, only the fibres from the leaves. Yep.
I have a question.
Yep.
And I have a mic so you can hear me.
Yeah.
Two species you showed, Aloe confusa and Chrysostachys, we both have two color forms in cultivation.
Yes,
Do
correct.
they co-occur? I mean, are there areas where they're just yellow or just red, or are they both in both environments?
For both of them, I've seen both yellow and red in the wild. The one I showed was yellow of confusa, but I had seen red there as well. And in Chrysostachys, the red flowered one was actually described as another species. It's widespread, and from another hill, it was described by John Loranus actually as another one, but that was later than Chrysostachys. Actually, he and I also described Chrysostachys. So, and then I found them both growing together, and they were obviously the same. So that went. The other one was called Meruana, the red flowered one. Yes?
Yeah, the Aloe Bailey that disappeared, did they disappear because they were collected for poison by collectors, or was just habitat?
No, it was clearing the bush for farming. As I said, they used to keep quite a wide patch of bush between the road and the farms. And now they're farming right to the edge of the road, which is rather stupid. We keep telling them because, you see, if they rely on bees or other insects for pollination, they're destroying the place where those things live, and they find their fruit level goes down. It's all right if they're growing corn, that's just pollinated by wind or the air. But it is rather unfortunate that they're doing that.